a new assistant captain arrives at a space station where she encounters a diverse crew, each with their personalities and secrets. In a distant galaxy, there's a giant space refueling station called Omega 76, under the command of Captain Glenn, a closeted man. While on the bridge, he grants clearance for a shuttle to land, bringing in his new second-in-command, the compassionate Jessica. After her arrival, the enthusiastic co-pilot heads to the main level, where she encounters a friendly child named Sunshine who has marked the walls with her purple crayon. Following standard procedure, Jessica reports to the medical capsule, where a robot examines her and detects irregularities in her uterus, rendering her incapable of bearing children. Meanwhile, the space station's narcissistic nutritionist, Misty, visits Dr. Bot, the robotic psychologist. She shares the positive effects of her treatment on her life and emphasizes the importance of living in the present moment. Upon meeting Jessica, Glenn briefs her on the ship's controls. Suddenly, a robot arrives to deliver the captain's liquor, but he declines the drink, insisting that the maintenance technician was the one who requested it. Following the commander's orders, the robot heads to the quarters of the mechanic Ted, who's trapped in a loveless marriage with Misty. Upon the maintenance technician's denial of ordering the intoxicating drink, the nutritionist volunteers to accept it. She consumes it along with Valium, an anti-anxiety medication. Shortly after, the couple discusses financial concerns. When Ted expresses his inability to cover their daughter Sunshine's tuition costs, his wife tells him not to worry since she can homeschool their child. Hearing this, the mechanic offers to help. However, Misty insists they should stop discussing the stressful topic. The next day, the nutritionist learns from her materialistic friend Donna that they have a new female captain. Meanwhile, Ted plays air hockey with his promiscuous friend Steve, Donna's husband, who expresses his admiration for Jessica's physical attributes. Intrigued, the mechanic asks him if he would ever be unfaithful to his wife, to which the man confidently responds with a yes. Later, Donna presents Jessica with a welcome gift, which includes the station's map. As the artistic woman leaves, she encourages the co-pilot to contact her if she needs help. Following this, the new assistant captain formally meets Misty, Sunshine's mom. The nutritionist extends a warm welcome, expressing her delight at having another woman on the space station. Driven by her love for children, Jessica reaches out to Sunshine in an attempt to make friends. She then informs Misty that she's willing to babysit the child sometime. In response, Misty praises the new co-pilot's maternal energy and curiously asks why she doesn't have children. Initially, the second-in-command explains that she's not ready for parenthood, leading the nutritionist to assume that the assistant captain has financial challenges or is just career-oriented. Shortly after, Jessica decides to disclose the truth that she cannot have children due to her medical condition, which comes as a shock to Misty. After the revelation, the second-in-command advises the woman to keep her secret. Meanwhile, Ted takes a work break and uses his mechanical prosthetic hand to light his cigar with a welding torch. At home, as Misty is leaving, she reminds Sunshine to watch her school tapes. Before going to work, the nutritionist briefly stops at a machine to acquire some Valium. Following this, she heads to her workstation to program the day's crew meal. In his quarters, Glenn rereads a letter from his former second-in-command, Daniel, who suddenly left the station, thinking it's better for both of them. Suddenly, the captain notices Sunshine standing before him, expressing her aspiration to become the station's commander one day. When the curious girl asks if he likes his job, Glenn enthusiastically shares his love for it and considers himself fortunate. However, as Sunshine persists with more questions, the grumpy captain begins to feel irritated, leading him to direct the child to search the entire station for her mom. Looking for someone to play with, the lonely girl goes to Donna's place and talks to her via a screen. The woman informs her that she can't visit yet because her baby is too young. Disheartened, the child walks away. Later in the station's arboretum, Jessica enjoys gardening when Ted and his daughter walk in. While the mechanic tends to his plants in the back, Sunshine remains in place, captivated by the sight of the trees. The co-pilot then goes over to the girl, explaining how trees release oxygen, which is essential for humans to breathe. To bond more with Sunshine, Jessica asks Ted if his daughter can stay to learn more about plants. The mechanic agrees but reminds the woman that the child should return to their quarters by 5. Meanwhile, Donna eagerly opens her mail, revealing photo reels of women's fashion clothing. Afterward, she becomes engrossed in viewing the pictures and neglects the needs of her crying child. In her bedroom, Sunshine is eagerly anticipating her pregnant gerbils' birth When her mom asks her to get a sock for the rodent's bedding, she spots a men's magazine in the cabinet. On the bridge, Glenn and Jessica discuss navigation issues. During their conversation, the enthusiastic co-pilot commends her predecessor, Daniel, for his skill in plotting trajectories and avoiding asteroid-filled areas. Upon hearing his former second-in-command's name, the uncomfortable captain suddenly avoids the topic. He claims to be busy when the woman hands him Daniel's graphs for his review. Later, while relaxing in his bathroom, the captain reminisces about his conversation with his past co-pilot. They once shared a hot tub, hinting they had a romantic relationship. Still deeply affected by his ex-lover's abrupt departure, Glenn grabs the radio and tries to take his own life by submerging the electronic device in his bath pod. However, the sensor detects the electrical overload and shuts down the system, thwarting the pilot's suicidal attempt. Following his workout, Ted smokes and becomes intoxicated, leading to hallucinations where he envisions a naked woman floating in the depths of outer space. Meanwhile, Sunshine enters her bedroom and flips through the explicit magazine she had seen earlier. Subsequently, she approaches her gerbil's cage and screams upon discovering the headless pup. At the same time, Misty meets with Steve, and they share a romantic moment while keeping it a secret from their respective spouses. When the nutritionist returns home, she comforts the tearful Sunshine, explaining that the mommy gerbil ate her offspring's head. After allowing her daughter to take Valium, the food expert advises the worried girl to relax because her pet still has 5 babies left. Upon discovering that Sunshine has taken an anti-anxiety medication, Ted becomes furious and raises his voice at his wife, concerned that the dosage could end their child's life. Misty defends herself, saying she only gave half a dose. Despite her explanation, the mechanic insists their daughter shouldn't take such medication. Unbeknownst to them, Sunshine watches their argument through the screen in her bedroom. Later, while Misty is at work, Ted plays the guitar while his mechanical hand recharges. Suddenly, Jessica requests permission to enter to follow up with him on the hydrogen tanks, which the captain requires for the following day. Shortly after, the inquisitive co-pilot asks why Daniel departed, leading the mechanic to explain that it was due to a family emergency. Hearing this, Jessica becomes even more intrigued because Glenn had told her that his former co-pilot had been promoted. However, Ted insists that he has provided the accurate reason. He explains that getting a promotion is challenging and involves being transferred to another ship after spending 2 years on a smaller one. A moment later, Jessica becomes curious about Ted's mechanical hand and examines it. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted by the arrival of Misty. The nutritionist invites the co-pilot to have a drink, but she politely declines and bids them farewell. The following day, Sunshine cries upon finding another baby gerbil has passed away. This continues for several more days until she is left with only one surviving pup. Concurrently, Ted experiences another hallucination, seeing the same naked woman as the previous day. However, this time, he envisions her with Jessica's face, suggesting his growing feelings for her. Suddenly, his moment is interrupted when the co-pilot arrives with Sunshine, whom she had been looking after for a while. After Jessica departs, the enthusiastic girl shares her desire to play the anti-gravity game with her dad. Ted agrees with the condition that his daughter must keep it a secret. Following this, the mechanic goes to the control panel and reduces gravity, allowing Sunshine to float joyfully inside the quarters. Later that day, Ted visits the arboretum to tend to his plants. Jessica comes across him and inquires about why he's growing plants, to which he replies that it's his hobby. Shortly after, the co-pilot reveals that she researched the plant and offers him some tips on how to care for it. On the bridge, a drunken Glenn interferes with the engine controls, repeatedly powering them up and down. As the captain becomes more intoxicated, he begins to talk to himself. In the station's botanical garden, Ted and Jessica spend time together. The mechanic teaches the second-in-command how to smoke. Afterward, they share a laugh while lying on the grass. Suddenly, the sprinklers activate, causing them to leave the area hastily. On her way to the bridge, the co-pilot forgets her folders, causing her to return to the arboretum. There, she discovers Sunshine attempting to free her last remaining baby gerbil. However, Jessica explains that the pup wouldn't survive alone in the garden because it needs to be near its mother. In response, the girl points out that the mommy gerbil will only eat her offspring. To help Sunshine comprehend why such behavior occurs, the co-pilot explains that mother gerbils sometimes consume their pups out of concern and anxiety, fearing that something terrible might happen to their offspring. Upon understanding this, the girl asks Jessica to be the baby gerbil's surrogate mother. The co-pilot agrees and places the pup in a box despite knowing what will happen. Sunshine then states they can return it to its real mom once it's bigger. Unfortunately, Misty becomes uneasy about her daughter and the co-pilot developing a close relationship. The narcissistic nutritionist openly disapproves of the woman and even goes as far as fabricating fabricating a lie that the second-in-command is jealous of her because she has a daughter. Despite her mother's negative comments towards Jessica, the girl remains fond of the friendly lady. Undeterred, Misty tries to convince her daughter to dislike the female captain by falsely alleging that the woman stole Sunshine's favorite dessert, a special sundae. However, her plan fails as the child doesn't appear to be bothered by it. In her quarters, Jessica tries to feed the baby gerbil and keep it alive. However, her attempts are unsuccessful. Meanwhile, Steve shares positive news with Donna about his sudden promotion to a dockmaster position. The couple publicly announces their forthcoming transfer to Starship 8 and the cafeteria. The materialistic woman eagerly anticipates the move and is excited about exploring the big ship's mall, where she can shop for clothes, shoes, bags, and dresses. Upon hearing about their crewmates' achievements, Ted congratulates them but secretly grapples with feelings of inadequacy about his career. On the other hand, Misty immediately feels envious and turns to Dr. Bott, articulating her discontent with the ship's stressful environment. In response, the robotic psychologist increases the dosage of Valium. When the machine inquires about what brings her comfort, the nutritionist responds that it's Dr. Bott. However, the robot reacts differently, reminding its client not to become too attached to her therapist. As the woman expresses her appreciation to Dr. Bott, the robotic therapist becomes overwhelmed with information, leading to a malfunction. Seeing this, Misty turns the machine off and embraces it. While Ted is at work, Glenn approaches him and instructs him to check the humidity levels on the bridge. When the mechanic suggests he'll finish the tanks first, the captain asks him to prioritize his order. Recognizing that the captain wants him to work overtime, the tired Ted expresses his frustration about not advancing in his career. He confronts the pilot and seeks confirmation regarding Danielle's promotion, which he learned from Jessica. Rather than revealing his past relationship with the former co-pilot, Glenn shares that his previous second-in-command received a promotion and that his mother has lupus. Later, a shuttle lands at the station, and Jessica receives her package containing a cryogenically frozen puppy, which she plans to give Sunshine as a Christmas gift. On the other hand, Donna speaks with the transporter and expresses concern that their belongings won't fit on the shuttle. Suddenly, Glenn passes by, leading the materialistic woman to request permission to take her hibernating mother-in-law with them without waking her up. Hearing this, the captain immediately approves. Meanwhile, Jessica discusses the cryogenic puppy with Misty. However, the nutritionist mentions that she's allergic, implying that she has plans to dispose of it instead of allowing it in her quarters. Upon learning this, the co-pilot asks the narcissistic woman not to say anything to Sunshine. Excited about their transfer to Starship 8, Steve and Donna pack their belongings, and Jessica assists them in carrying the boxes. However, when she notices the transporter about to take her mother-in-law into the shuttle, the materialistic woman requests the man to take her belongings instead. Shortly after, Donna informs her husband that the shuttle won't be able to accommodate his hibernating mother for the time being, suggesting that the old woman's storage pod can follow later with her husband's storage equipment. In Misty's workstation, Sunshine asks for a sundae, but the dessert is out of stock when her mom pushes the button. Because of this, the nutritionist goes to the fridge to look for an alternative. When her daughter spots the cryogenically frozen puppy inside, the selfish woman pretends to be surprised, stating that she's attempting to keep it a secret. Misty retrieves the cryopreserved critter and presents it to her daughter, claiming it's her Christmas gift. The envious woman also lies, telling Sunshine they must keep the pet home because Jessica is allergic to puppies. On the bridge, the co-pilot approaches Glenn, looking forward to discussing Danielle's charts, believing they will significantly help them. However, the captain insists that it's not necessary since he has already reviewed the records. In response, Jessica suggests that they should have the charts in front of them to use for avoiding asteroids. However, Glenn acts strangely, evidently avoiding the topic. Sensing that he's uncomfortable, Jessica confronts the captain to ask if he has any issues with Danielle, but he doesn't reveal the truth. When the co-pilot asks for the truth about her predecessor's departure, Glenn emphasizes that it's truly due to a promotion. He then speaks through the microphone to make a public announcement, aiming to clear up any confusion among the crew members. Later, Jessica encounters Sunshine on the main level and invites her to visit the arboretum to see the bonsai tree. However, the girl declines the offer. In his quarters, the captain opens a letter from the Federation of Star Command. After reading the contents, the dejected pilot tries to take his own life, life. However, his attempt is interrupted when a voice announces that the crew should vote for their new cafeteria wallpaper for their upcoming Christmas party. When Glenn attempts to harm himself again, the doorbell rings, revealing Misty and Sunshine singing a Christmas song for him. Later, the captain contacts Daniel through a hologram, congratulates him on his promotion, and asks if he received the same notice about needing to complete 20 hours of required psychotherapy when he abruptly left Omega 76. Hearing this, Daniel becomes emotional and reiterates that his reason for leaving is because Glenn always had to be inebriated before he made love to him. The captain interrupts him, reminding his former boyfriend to be cautious when discussing their relationship because it could affect their careers. Shortly after, the irritated Daniel says goodbye but hears a beep, realizing that Glenn recorded their call, which the former second-in-command considers a pathetic move. Meanwhile, Jessica visits Ted and confides in him about feeling alone and their shared experience of being fractured individuals. When the co-pilot mentions that the mechanic lost his hand in battle, the man corrects her, explaining that he accidentally shot it off while cleaning a laser refractor piston in his first week of service. Upon learning this, the compassionate Jessica suddenly holds his mechanical hand and places it on her chest. Curiously, she pushes a button, causing it to touch her inappropriately. As she panics in pain, the maintenance technician quickly deactivates it. Feeling uncomfortable with what happened, the co-pilot excuses herself and leaves. Glenn replays the recorded hologram call in his quarters and edits it to hear his ex-boyfriend say he wants to make love to him. He repeatedly listens to it and then engages in self-pleasure. Afterward, the captain goes to his required psychotherapy session with Dr. Bott. During the session, the captain asks if he can smoke, but the machine doesn't allow him to. As they begin their conversation, the pilot talks about the upcoming Christmas party and how he feels the need to pretend that the people on the ship are his friends. As he listens, the captain notices that the robotic psychologist is programmed to respond using one of his client's words. Realizing this, he doesn't take his required psychotherapy seriously and gets his cigar to smoke. In preparation for the Christmas party, the crew members dress elegantly before heading to the cafeteria. Meanwhile, Glenn activates the space station's autopilot. Later during the gathering, Ted and Jessica sit beside each other and have an enjoyable conversation. Seeing that her husband is happy with the co-pilot, Misty suddenly suggests they play a game where everyone shares a secret. Steve attempts to leave, fearing that his secret relationship with the nutritionist will be revealed. However, his wife Donna insists that they stay. As the game begins, Misty goes first and reveals that she has never had a peak experience in bed while looking at Ted. The mechanic immediately becomes offended, anticipating potential judgment from others. He then shouts at his wife, sarcastically commanding her to share more secrets. However, she only redirects the attention to Jessica, telling everyone that the co-pilot has a secret too. When the co-pilot asks her to stop the game, the nutritionist publicly reveals that Jessica acts manly and has chosen her career as a second-in-command because she's not a real woman, hinting at her inability to bear children. Offended, Jessica yells at Misty, leading Glenn to intervene. When he asks his co-pilot to act more feminine, she responds aggressively, asking why the captain can't be a man. In response, the commander expresses confusion, driving the woman to clarify that everyone knows he's into men. However, the captain denies this. Seconds later, Misty interjects again, telling Ted she only stays with him because of Sunshine. Suddenly, everyone is interrupted when an asteroid collides with a space station. The impact destroys the shuttle carrying Steve and Donna's belongings, causing their possessions to float away into space. Meanwhile, Sunshine, left alone in the quarters, thaws her cryogenically frozen puppy, which sadly results in the animal's demise. Heartbroken, she finds herself walking on the station's main level. The Christmas party is cancelled after the incident, and the crew members leave the cafeteria. Steve and Donna return to their quarters to hug their infant, realizing their family is more important than their material obsessions. In the Arboretum, Ted and Jessica lie together in the grass gazing at the galactic sky, feeling a stronger connection. Meanwhile, Glenn frees himself by erasing his recorded hologram call with Danielle. He then heads out and runs into the transporter, inviting him for a drink. Back in their dimly lit quarters, Misty sits alone, contemplating her actions. Sunshine returns and, in a playful mood, reduces the gravity, allowing herself to float. She looks out the window, watching a mesmerizing meteor shower.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.